All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lou Bryson. Plus, this week, special guest, Dr. Don Livermore, who I will let your host give you a better introduction to in just a moment. Before we get started, real quick, I'm Will Hookinga from Savvy.co. If you are joining us for the first time, just to give you a quick lay of the land before we jump in. So to the right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I see Brad Krause from Panama, Bill Lupton near Calgary, Brett from Nashville. Hey, Brett, that's where I am. Good to see a neighbor.
There's two people in Nashville?
Yeah, that's right. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you'll notice a button at the bottom that says Ask a Question. That, as you may have guessed, is the best way to do that. Just enter your question in there. I'll be keeping an eye on those throughout the presentation and sending them over to your hosts here. And last but not least, feel free to share the event. There's a button at the top that does that, lets you invite your friends easily. But with all that said, Marty, Liz, Lou, I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you, young Will. You are not only the master of the dark arts, but the master of the game of badminton. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Martin Duffy. I am a former master of whiskey from Diageo, many decades doing that. And then 18 glorious months as the national brand ambassador for Benedictine and B&B. So talk French to me, people. And
then to the stars.
Yeah, huge. Well, I think all the stars were dead back in the 30s, though, unfortunately. And then for 8 years, I was the co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo. And for the last 6.5 years now, I've been honored to be the national brand representative for the Glencairn glass. Woo! So, top of the morning to you. That's Irish. I mean, Scottish. All right, Lizard.
Excellent. Thanks, Marty. I think. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining today's show with Dr. Don Livermore. So really excited to have you on today. So thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have just over a decade of experience across the alcoholic beverage space. Worked on a couple different categories, so beer, rum, vodka, but my particular specialty and expertise is in whiskey, which is really exciting. So I spent most of my career at Diageo, spent a many of time in Canada distilling as well. So also excited to have a Canadian master blender on. But I am now founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that and about the host section, there's a little link to my website. So check that out. Over to Lou.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Also like to welcome Don. Good to see you. Glad to have you on board. Love talking blending. I'm a whiskey writer. Have been for well over 20 years now. I was the managing editor at Whiskey Advocate for about 20 years, and now freelance. It's my latest book, Whiskey Masterclass, a book about the creation of flavor and aroma in whiskey, and also a senior drinks writer for Daily Beast. And this is what's in my glass today. Tribute to Don, the wiser 13-year-old. Very nice.
Whoa! Did you go out and buy that?
No, I keep this on hand.
Wow!
It's delicious. Yeah.
Well,
over to you, Marty.
All right. Well, everyone, today, again, in our efforts to make this a global show, bringing people from all over the world. We go far afield to a foreign country. Luckily, I speak the language. We go all the way to the Great White North, and we bring in the man who is, I think is the blending, or the whiskey face, I should say. You're the whiskey face, if you don't take that the wrong way. You're the face of Canadian whiskey. You see him at every whiskey show. He is there, and he's always crowded around like a zombie horde around his table. It's Dr. Don Livermore, everybody.
Thank you. I think you should drop the mic now.
That's it. That's all we have.
Good night, everybody.
we tell them that every week. It hasn't worked yet.
Well, it's a privilege to be on the show today, where I'm all of 800 meters away from foreign land. So.
Yeah, I was.
And if anyone doesn't know what 800 meters is, half a mile maybe, half a mile away. I can see it out the office window.
You must be tapping into some of this American Wi-Fi. That's what I'm thinking.
Yes, there you go. It's yes, I'm all the way from Windsor, Ontario, which is south of the U.S. border. There's your Trivial Pursuit question for you. The only Canadian city south of the U.S. border is Windsor, Ontario. So I'm broadcasting, I suppose, from the Hiram Walker Distillery, which is one of the largest distilleries in North America. I've been working at the site pretty much since graduation, 25 years in the business next year. So it's my silver anniversary next year, come February. And I've been the master blender since 2012. Also, there's a little bit of the historical for my background. I do have a bachelor's of science in brewing or in microbiology, and I finished my master's and PhD in brewing and distilling at Watts. So comes in handy day to day, and certainly sensory and whiskey. And I'd like to thank the folks at Glencairn for I don't know if we can see the there. I can put it there. Personalizing. Nice. Me as a master blender for Pernod Ricard. Thank you very much. And I'm christening the glass today with something very special, at least a couple of them. This is our new release in Canada. And I know you guys have not seen it yet in the US, and this thing is on fire. It's on fire. At the moment, it's pretty much sold out in British Columbia. In our brand center, we sold our initial allotment within about 2 minutes on our website.
Wow!
Wow!
It's crazy busy. So cheers, eh?
Cheers!
Yeah. Cheers! Virtual cheers.
What now? Is that Don? Is that color looks dark?
Yeah,
that is
it
dark,
is.
Rich color.
Maybe I'll put it against the white background. Yeah. There you go.
Can you go into a little of that? What gives it that color? What's going on in that bottle?
Yeah. So for those who don't know what Lot 40 is, Lot 40 is our 100% rye whiskey. In Canada, we're mostly centered around blending whiskey. We're a little bit of the opposite of bourbon, where we ferment corn separately, rye separately, barley separately, wheat separately, distill it separately, age it separately, and we put it together at the end. Although we don't have to, the larger distilleries will operate that way. We do call our whiskeys rye whiskeys in Canada because rye is the spice to Canadian whiskey. It's like if you order the dish curry chicken in the restaurant, curry's the spice to the chicken, rye's the spice to our whiskey. So rye ends up giving us flavor, that warm feeling through the chest. I'm sure you've heard the Kentucky hug. Well, we got a Canadian hug as well. It's that warm feeling. So Lot 40 is our rye flavoring whiskey, period. It's been column and pot distilled. So when you do that method of distillation, what it dials up is the real spicy characters in your whiskey. 4-ethyl glycol, if you see my whiskey wheel in behind me there. That's what we're looking for, to bring that big spicy nuance to it. And this is bold and beautiful rye whiskey as it comes. It's award-winning, but we've did one more thing to this brand as the extension, as it's been released in British Columbia and soon to be in Ontario. We do age Lot 40 in the number 2 brand new virgin American oak casks. After at the last year of this life, we put it into number 4 casks, hence the word dark oak.
Oh.
Yes, it's like, I think I don't have nothing to do with the packaging, but I think they did a fantastic job in reference to what our mother brand is, which is over the top of my head there at the moment. And the other thing is, too, when we're thinking of blending whiskey, guys, I did pop the strength up to 48% ABV from the normal 43%. And there is method to the madness. At higher strengths, you're going to get more woody and grain character coming out. So if we want to emphasize what the wood is doing to this rye whiskey here, and certainly have it match with the rye, we wanted to pop the strength up a little bit.
Wow. I mean,
you...
Go ahead, Lizard.
No, I was just gonna comment. So that went into the normal entry proof. You just didn't dilute as much for the bottle. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yeah. Yep. That's how we do it. Typically, we'll put our rye whiskeys away at 58% ABV. Here in Southern Ontario, if anyone's been to the Michigan and the Detroit area, it's very hot and humid here in the summertime, and because of the relative humidity, we will lose strength in our casks over time. It's usually those arid climates, the strength will go up, but just like Kentucky here, we'll go down in strength. So I would expect to lose maybe 1% alcohol every 2 to 3 years. It's kind of about that rate.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Canadian whiskey seems to, I mean, it's funny. Down here in the U.S., for the longest time, it had a bad rap among some people. There's a lot of other folks who adore it. I mean, Canadian whiskey, I think, does very, very well. In fact, actually, you were telling us yesterday, giving us a little history lesson that I was never aware of, and I'm going to check that out because it seems fishy. But go ahead, tell us about the whole connection when Canadian whiskey really became big in the U.S.
I think to your thing that the Canadian whiskey gets a bad rap a little bit. I think it's just a little bit of the times that we're in is Canadian whiskey way back in the infancy in the early 1800s would have been largely moonshine style of whiskey. Like we had the Scottish Highland clearances, so you had a lot of settlers bringing in pot stills. Certainly 1776, your American audience knows that year. We had a lot of the British Empire loyalists coming in through the States and very raw, rough whiskey. A company called Gooderham Worts developed a patent in the 1840s called the Riley patent, which was the art of distilling twice or 2 column stills. What that did was strip the whiskey and it made it lighter and smoother because that's what consumers wanted. They did not want that heavy moonshine, raw, rough whiskey any longer. So by double distilling it, making it light and smooth, and they would also try to blend out their rye inventories because it was very harsh and aggressive. So that's where Canadian whiskey started blending, kind of around the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s. And that's where you see a traditional style of whiskey. That's why it tends to be lighter and smoother in comparison to the bourbon cousins. Wiser's Deluxe and Wiser's 18-year Let Loose Having is classic style Canadian whiskey, light, smooth, approachable style of whiskeys. Whereas consumers today are looking for something with a heavier body, like a Lot 40. We've never would have ever released our rye flavoring whiskey on its own ever in the past.
Yeah.
But we're now understanding that consumers want that bigger, bolder body taste. So yeah, we're gutsy. We can do that, and we have done that. But where I think Marty's going with what was kind of insightful when we were chatting yesterday is most people think that Canadian whiskey grew because of Prohibition. And Prohibition actually killed our category, quite honestly, because we've lost our distribution. We lost our biggest customer. I know illicit things and some really cool stories went on during that time period. But beknownst to most people, the biggest growth for Canadian whiskey was the American Civil War. And if you think about it, America North is fighting the America South. That set up a scenario, right? Do you think the North and South are going to sell each other whiskey? The men went to war. Would they have used their food source to go into whiskey? I believe the South had a prohibition inside of their war camps. The North taxed and went from 20 cents a gallon to $1.50 a gallon in a period of 4 years, and that just set the scenario right for Canadians to import. And we see the biggest growth of Hiram Walker and Gooderham Worts and Corby and J.P. Weiser during that time period, and then that's where these gentlemen start to focus on whiskey distillation as opposed to their other businesses.
It didn't stop U.S. Grant from drinking, though.
No. I'm sure he dabbled in Canadian whiskey a time or two, for sure.
So what was the industry like, though? Say after the Civil War. I mean, was Canadian? You don't really hear much about Canadian whiskey being a player. You know, you hear, at least here in the U.S., it was bourbon, Irish, and then later in the later half of the 19th century, Scotch starts showing up.
So in 2017 in Canada, I always say this to Canadians because they get really excited, is we celebrated a anniversary in 2017 and that was our 150-year anniversary. No, That was our 100-year anniversary. And they'll get the confused look on their face. And it's the 100-year anniversary of paying taxes.
Wow.
I don't know if it's a celebration, all right. Yeah.
I'm gonna go out and celebrate by paying more taxes today.
Yes, but Canadians did not pay taxes for 50 years. We had a government. So how did the government run? So where did they get their tax dollars from? It was from the whiskey distillers.
Whiskey.
Yeah, the five largest taxpayers were Gooderham and Worts, Hiram Walker, Wisers, Corby, and Seagrams. They're the 5 largest taxpayers on Canada. And I'll often will tell audiences is Canada was built on whiskey. It was really built off the backs of the whiskey producers, but the government recognized it in the mid 1800s, 1870s. We went through a Great Depression. I think they called it the Big Depression at that point. And that's probably what scenarios are going on today where your protections of what's being manufactured in your country. The whiskey producers, since they were so critical to the tax dollars, the Canadian government wanted to protect it because they were bringing in rums and American whiskeys and cognacs from around the world at a cheaper price at it. So they put on taxes, right? Import duties right about that time. And they still wanted to sell Canadian whiskey. So the government at that time said, well, we want to make this seem like a premium product. So we're going to put the minimum age declaration on your brand. Canadian whiskey was the first whiskey category in the world to mandate a minimum aging requirement. 25 years ahead of Scotch, 25 years ahead of Irish whiskey. The first we see in America is the Taft Act. You started seeing aging. I know there's some American whiskeys today that doesn't even have aging on it as well, but Canadians were the first ones. The government forced it on our guy. And they interviewed Hiram Walker late in his life in 1895, and he said, I would have never started a distillery today knowing I had age alcohol. I mean, why would I? It's cash to my business. I would have never, because I got to buy barrels, I got to buy warehouses, I got to buy all these things now. I would have never started it. J.P. Weiser's inventory 2 years before the law, he had 20,000 gallons on hand. 1 year in the law, he had 120,000 gallons. 2 years in the law, he had 260. Increased his inventory by 20 times. You tell me the whiskey business is full circle today. What's the first thing new distillers? I'm sure you've had new distillers on your program. What's the first thing they're making to try to make money today?
Sure.
Vodka,
gin.
Something like, right? How things are full circle. But to finish the story to what you're talking about, you haven't heard much about Canadian whiskey. What these distillers were, they were clever. They did marketing in the 1890s. And what they would put on the labels is, yes, this is a bonded whiskey that's been aged under the supervision of the Canadian government. They used to have 60 excise officers at our distillery watching every ounce of alcohol being made. They had locks on every switch because it was the tax dollars to the country. They wanted to make sure they got their tax. By the year 1900, Canadian whiskey was the largest whiskey category in the world. The largest distillery in the world was a Gooderham and Worts distillery downtown Toronto, making 2 million gallons of whiskey a year. Canada was built on whiskey.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. That's kind of the whole age statement thing. Supposedly, David Lloyd George, who was the teetotaler, Prime Minister of England at the time, he pushed for the 3-year minimum.
Ours started at it 2, and eventually moved to 3. Yeah,
and it was said he was doing that to hurt the whiskey industry. Not to help it, because he thought, okay, now you can't sell it for 3 years. Let's see ya. But then all the Scots and everybody just turned around and said, ooh, look at my whiskey. It's been 3 years. Oh, no, mine's 6 years. Now we have this case where everyone goes gaga over 18-year-old whiskey, not knowing it was all of marketing.
And it all started in that time period. All these government people started forcing on it because I think they recognize the importance to each of their countries, right?
Yeah. To a degree.
Yeah.
Louis? Well, I'm sorry, Liz.
No, I'm just sitting here thinking that the whiskey tax was important in the U.S. as well. It was the major source of income for our government until, 1914? I think we put in the income tax.
Well, didn't they get rid of it? We had, obviously, Washington imposed it. We had the Whiskey Rebellion. They had it for a while. I think Jefferson got rid of it, and then Lincoln
get rid of it.
Reimposed it because of the
Civil War. To pay for the war. Yeah.
And I don't know if it ever went away after that, after the Civil War.
Lou, I've often will say, because I've told the story 100 times, but I think what country couldn't claim that? right?
Yeah.
Either built on whiskey or beer tax or something like that, right? I bet you most countries were built that way.
Yeah, I actually had a thing. My historical statistics class. I got a master's in history, and I found some numbers on barley prices in the Netherlands, and no matter what the price was, the consumption of spirits and beer stayed the same. People didn't care how much it cost; they were going to buy that much. The demand was inelastic, and if I'm looking for tax revenue, that's where I'm going to look for a product like that.
Well, I think they call that rocketing. Is that once consumers are buying something, like even if say the economy is really, really good, they're going to buy older whiskey. That's what they're going to stick with. Even when the economy goes down, they might buy less of it, but they're going to buy as much as they can afford at that level, and that's it. And it's going to be, they have to go through some kind of therapy in order to.
Are you at your price elasticity now? That's a great comment, because if you look at our distillery, we have 1.6 million barrels on site. Our warehouses are the size of 132 hockey arenas, stacked 6 barrels high.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not too Canadian.
Yeah. Down here, you say football fields. Up there, hockey.
Yeah.
NHL, for those Canadians, they'll know what I'm saying. It's NHL size drinks, not Olympic size drinks.
Even your whiskey thieves are shaped like hockey sticks up there.
There you go. Yes. I shoot left, by the way. But one barrel today is worth $1,000 worth of tax. That's how much tax is on a Canadian. So you can't even tell me that it's not important to the economy today. So if we have 1.6 million barrels, that's $1.6 billion of excise tax sitting in our warehouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. And the other thing too, up in Canada, we were talking to Davin DeKirkmo not too long ago. Wow, I'm so proud I can pronounce his name now. I think I did. There's a booming distilling community now. I mean, it's not just some of the big guys. You have a lot of these little guys. You have some wonderful whiskey festivals. Yes. I've seen you at the Victoria Whiskey Festival a couple of years in a row, and that's a great event, folks. If you really think of Canadian whiskey, you got to go to that event.
Yes,
there's some stuff. In fact, you did a class with Davin and Dave Broom, and the stuff you were pouring out, it was all yours. It was like
phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then I've just a trend over the last 6 to 12 months. I'm starting to see people comment on my Instagram. You can see at the bottom of the CDN Whiskey Doc if you don't follow me, or Twitter, that the sense is that Canadian whiskey holds up to the standards of all the other whiskey categories in the world. It's just, I think it's one of those things that I appreciate you guys doing today, is that us as Canadians have just not gone out and told our story. We've sat on our hands. We don't brag about it. We don't stand up and shout. I think that's kind of hurt us in the last 70 to 80 years, is that we have not taken the position of, hey, when was the last time you met a master blender in Canada? Or when was the last time you met a master distiller in Canada? And I think that's part of the problem, is we just don't go out there and sell ourselves to what our products are, and talk about what it is. And what is Canadian whiskey? What does it represent? And I think we're getting better at it. And like I said, the last 6 to 12 months, I'm starting to see people make the commentary about, you guys get some good stuff. Why are you keeping it to Canada? Why is it not going to other countries? And then so the last couple of months, we've actually launched the cask strength Lot 40 into the U.S. It's gone into Illinois and Massachusetts. We've released a Gooderham Worts, 19-year-old as well, as a rare release into the U.S. through our partnerships with Hodeling. So if anyone wants to look at some rare and beautiful Canadian whiskeys, go to hodeling.com and they'll be able to tell you where you can pick up some of these gems. And they're very small, limited releases, but they are fantastic and award-winning, and they just win all the time. And it's finally getting out there. not fast enough for me, but still, it's just getting the word and into the liquid to lips. I think.
Well, I think you're right.
Comment.
Sorry.
What?
Go ahead.
Go, Liz.
Yes. So your comment earlier around launching flavoring marks. So the whole premise around Lot 40 and that becoming more of a trend, is that more of a demand from the export market, or is that a trend seeing within the change of Canadian consumers?
Quite honestly, Liz, Canadian consumers, there's probably a niche amount of people that want cask strength rye whiskeys. And it's not a big group, but they're there. They're passionate. They love it. I think a little bit of the trend is coming from the U.S. market as well.
Yeah.
And hence why we put the cask strength Lot 40 this year into the U.S. market. So I think it's those two places, and you're starting to see that. But other than that, around the world, I'm finding that people like more the blended products that we make, like a JP Wiser's or a Pike Creek. More so, they like the smoother, maybe barrel finish styles of whiskeys. I think the heavier, bolder, or niche connoisseurs, to be honest with you, and they're there, and we like launching them for them. But I think the majority still likes the blended, and they just like the balance side of it. To be quite frank.
Yeah, I was just drawing analogies to Crown single barrel program and sort of the niche with that starting in the US as well. So just wasn't sure with the craft. Okay.
It's niche. Yeah. It's niche, I think. I don't think you're going to sell 100,000 cases of big, bold rye whiskeys. I still, at the end of the day, I think people want that versatility in the styles of the whiskey. And that's just my take of just reading the audiences. It may change. Ebb and flows. Most Canadians like the lighter, smoother, what you guys talked about earlier as traditional style Canadian whiskey. That's traditionally what you've seen in the U.S. But you're seeing a change. You're seeing a change to start pushing a little bit more flavor in that whiskey. I don't know why. I think people's diets are changing. I think they're getting more experience in the culinary side. They're seeing bigger, bolder, spicier foods. And I'm seeing recipes we're developing today probably having more rye blended into it than in the past. Our parents liked the lighter corn style of whiskeys, but you're seeing it shift a little bit. I mean, I got my recipe books in here in front of me from the past. You can see a shift in where people are going, and to build on it, Liz, too. I think the thing with a master blender, the most important skill you need to have is certainly listening to your consumers.
Yeah.
I'm not making whiskey for my taste. If it was, it wouldn't be any of these up here. It's what, and then that's where we've met at. I know you two fellas have been at the Victoria. That's where my test and learn is, to see what people's reactions on things. And it's a beautiful whiskey fest if anyone certainly wants to go to it.
And they are doing it again this year, but I think it might be virtual, or it might be a different kind of setup, because they've ordered glasses from me. I'm gonna have my second pour, if that's all right.
All right.
Sure. Got some for everybody. Hello.
Yeah, buddy.
Wow.
Very cool.
What's that? Oh, okay.
What's your oldest whiskey up there, Don?
I got a 35-year-old that won the Canadian Whiskey of the Year. I think probably one of the years, maybe Lou was there. I can't remember. Cheers, by the way. This is a cask strength blend, by the way.
Wow.
Nice.
So, well, I as far as the blends go, for the longest time, especially after single malts of any kind, and then rye was the darling. So many people just glommed onto these, single barrel bourbons. They just, those were the hot things. And you try to tell people, all that is all great. That is all good and great, and I'm glad you enjoy those. Those are wonderful. But if you're sticking your nose up at blended whiskeys across the board, there are some good. There might be some bad blends out there, but there's some bad
some bad straights. Yeah.
That's the nature of the beast. You got to go out there and experiment with blends and taste them, because you might be passing up some really affordable gems.
Yeah. So a couple of things. What I'll want to do is, this one was a little bit. I challenged Dave Broom and to put Dave's name out there, but if you can see that on the label.
Will, can you expand? There you go.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
What is his name there?
Yeah, no, it's cask strength blend.
Oh, Oh, well, yeah.
Interesting. And I at that Victoria Whiskey Fest there a few years ago, I challenged Davin and Dave. I said, well, I know there's cask strength blends. So you go out there, you do your barrel picks, you talked about it, and bourbon, you have that mixed grape mash bill, you make it, you pick your barrel, and that's your cask strength blend. Same thing with single malts, right? Goes through a pot still a couple of times, you put it, and that's your single malt cask strength blend, or cask strength. What happens at the Canadian whiskey distiller, we can distill through column stills once, go through column stills twice. We can go through a column and a pot still. They don't tell us how to distill it. It's up to me. How do you want to distill it? I mean, so typically when we make a blend, we'll put a pot still together with a column still or double distilled light whiskey. What happens when you take all these different ingredients at different strengths and you put it together and then you don't add water? Is that actually called cask strength at that point?
Well, no. Well, because
you think about cask strength single malts and think about cask strength bourbons, it's always from the same type of distillate.
True.
Oh yeah, but I mean,
what happens when it's a different distillate and you blend them together?
That would
if
be
it
cask
still
strength.
meets the definition of that crashing type.
Yeah, with the plural.
Well, I mean, they did that. They did that with Johnny Walker Blue. They put a cask strength Johnny Walker Blue, and that's a blend of single malts and single grain.
As you look at the language we put out there, and that's what we talked about, is that cask strength blend.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. How much? What's
is it a new category? Is it a new category of whiskey?
Probably is for Canada. I mean, do you look at when you talk about Canadian whiskey? Do you always compare it to other categories, or is it?
I did, and I when I talked to David that, he says I couldn't think of anybody that was doing exactly that. What do you call that? That's what I asked him. I said, you've seen every whiskey in the world, Dave, and they said, well, I don't know what you call that, right?
Monique commented she votes yes.
She likes the new definition of a cask strength. You see what I'm saying, Marty, right?
Yeah,
you got different strengths. What do you call that?
Well, but if you have different strengths, there's different strength. I mean, because
there's naturally different strengths, right? Potentially.
Yeah,
no,
we're
going from high 76s to.
But are they all? Right? If they're all coming,
if it's a pot or column still.
They're all coming from different casks. I mean, I think that's the important thing is they're coming from out of a cask, and every cask is going to be different strengths. I mean,
that's what
Right.
These are extreme.
Yeah. See, I think just like the nerd. Well, I agree with the nerd.
I don't know who he's calling a nerd here, but
well,
I don't know if we're coming to the center of each other or if you're moving this way, but
I like the blend because, like you said, you've got the cask strength piece, but then you've got the different distillate piece.
Yeah, that's
so you
right.
have to have both of those in the name of the. Because otherwise, I mean, I don't know though. On the other hand,
see, you look like what Dave looked like. He said, "I don't know what you."
I say, don't worry about it. Just do it and slap. If you slap a name on it, then
it's fanciful language. Is that what it is?
It wasn't Lou Bryson until someone showed up with a little baby and slapped the name Lou Bryson on it.
Oh, poor kid.
Right? Yeah,
that's one heck of an analogy.
Scott Marty hour. That's
hour.
Steve Basher from Mount Vernon Distillery. Everybody, and Monique's. By the way, if Monique votes twice or votes yes, that counts for 2 votes.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, 2. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how.
Anyhow, we wanted to just to describe it legitimately as to what it was, and we certainly did that, and it's been just going great, that whiskey, and people are looking for those cask strength blends, if you want to call it. And so now you can blend different things to get, and we still call it kind of a cask strength. It can be a real fun territory.
Yeah.
Now, also to Canada is I believe we discussed this. I brought this up with Davin. Canada is a strange agent when it comes to trying to get your whiskey around. Because the provinces, I was told by one distiller in Victoria that it was easier to get distribution for your whiskey in the U.S. than it was to get distribution in other provinces.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of the criticisms I'll get on when I do on my social media feeds is how come my province doesn't have it? How come my province doesn't have this, and then this province has it? It is going to pitch your brand at the start of each year to each province separately, and I got a cask strength blend, 22-year-old. Do you want it? And some provinces are more progressive, and they want premiumization of Canadian whiskey, and others want volume. I mean, and that's where it comes down to. And most of them are run by governments, like the Pennsylvania board.
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
Yeah.
Is that based on consumer demographic or some sort of consumer insights, or is it based off of
probably I think actually both. It is. Okay. They want to make their money too, right? They take their tax dollars and they want to make sure they got brands that aren't going to shit on the shelf, and it's got consumer demand to it. So when you're making these pitches to them every year, some are a little more aggressive than others, and that's really what it comes down to. It's not my decision or anything. I mean, I'd love to sell it in every province or in every state, but it's that's the reality of what it's like to make whiskey. I'll often say it's 30% making whiskey. It's probably 70% sales and distribution. Really, you can make the best whiskey going, but the tough part is liquid on lips and getting it out there and to your public.
Well, can we go back to when you were talking about Canadians not putting themselves out there? Is it a cultural thing, or is there a business component to that, or?
Both, actually. Okay. I think the business side of it, I think us as Canadians, we went through a mass decline in the 80s. We lost our sales by 40% from about 1980 to the 1990s, right? So we sat on inventories. You tried to blend the classic stuff out. So it was a little bit of that, and we were bought up by large companies, large conglomerates, and they treated the Canadian whiskey category like a cash cow. A little bit of a no A&P to it, just keep selling it. You're making money on it, make it profitable. They had to right size their businesses as well. And I think because of some of the companies, they just would not put their master blender or master distiller or brand ambassadors out there. That's the way Canadian whiskey is treated. So, and I think it is a little bit.
They just figured as long as it was selling, why put more money in it? Is that?
Yeah, and yet the focus would be on Scotch or bourbon and things like that. And it's taken us, a good decade to start to mine out of that and start getting out there talking about it. And it is probably a little bit of a shyness too, I think. I don't think it's a comfortable place to go out there and brag about your product, right? It's not
my experience
comfortable
actually.
Either. So
anecdotally,
so Lou, I think it's both. To be honest with you, I think it's just a mix of things. I think that's an insightful question.
Well, I always thought. I mean, especially over the last in my years in the business, which had been about 30 years. But even prior, when I was growing up, you always saw some Canadian whiskey. My folks would have Canadian whiskey for parties. And it was definitely seen as this is your dad's whiskey kind of stuff. But then there was a bunch of folks, especially like when everyone became whiskey snobs, and then they just started bashing Canadian whiskey for just being flavored vodka and stuff like this.
That comment bugs me.
And then you had because the Canadians, and maybe who knows, maybe it's geographically you guys are a freaking big country, but but a small population comparatively. You're spread out across a vast wilderness with polar bears and moose. Whereas they go to Scotland, it's only 5 million people in a country the size of South Carolina. And so, and same thing, Ireland. Ireland's had 2-3 distilleries for the longest period of time, but they're in a country the size of Indiana, and yet you hear all about their stuff. They do talk, and they take a certain amount of pride in it. But you didn't hear from the Canadians, and instead you heard from all the naysayers all that time, and you kind of gave that window. So you got to get on your fellow countrymen's butts.
Do you know what my take is? And we can go in. Here's my take. I've made a couple mistakes in my life. Number one, I was in Winnipeg in February.
Enough said.
You've been there. Minus 50. minus 50.
It's our Fahrenheit and Celsius meet. That's the tagline I have.
Yeah, even further, minus 40 is where they meet. But
minus 40, correct.
And it was at that's when Winnipeggers have their whiskey fest, right? So I was at their whiskey fest. You guys been to whiskey festivals? And it was a slow night, and I take my Glencairn glass. Right? They had Glencairns there, and we walk around.
Cold.
I was walking around. I meet my competitors, and we talk about what you're working on, and brand ambassadors, and stuff. And I had a great evening that night. Mistake number 2. I got asked to go on live television 6:45 in the morning following the whiskey fest. Cobwebs and all. 6:45 in the morning. I was on with our Irish whiskey ambassador and our Scotch ambassador. So you got an Irish and a Scotch and a Canadian. It sounds like a bad joke already.
Yeah.
It's a radio station.
Yeah. Live TV, breakfast television, supposed to be casual. My mistake really wasn't going on TV so early. My mistake, really, when you go on a live broadcast, you should ask the question you're going to be asked, right? That's 101, right? Right, and I didn't. I said, I can wing it. I can do anything whiskey. But I was unprepared for the question I was asked, and it was this: put the mic in my face, and I was to go first. What makes Canadian whiskey better than Scotch or Irish whiskey?
Oh, whoa!
Ouch.
Marty's looking.
Brutal.
No, that question's always easy because you find the diplomat and you go, no whiskey's better than another.
That's like you're saying, why is your bar better than my bar? I mean, but I said,
it's my bar. God damn it!
How do I answer that question? And I love this story because it really came to me in that moment, and this is how I answered it. Canadian whiskey is the most innovative, creative, adaptable style of whiskey there is. All we have to do is be made of grain, fermented, aged, and distilled in Canada, aged in a wooden barrel of less than 700 liters for a minimum of 3 years and a minimum of 40% alcohol. They don't tell us we have to use a mash bill. We can if we want, don't have to. They don't tell us how to distill it, whatever proof we want to go to. They don't tell us the barrel type. And it's made of wood. Doesn't even have to say what type of wood. You know what? That makes Canadian whiskey diverse. Isn't that Canada? My mic drop. There you go.
Thanks for joining.
They're getting petitions for you to run for prime minister. It's like, oh, he's good. He's a winner.
But I think it sums it up because Canadian whiskey, we're a mishmash of people from wherever, and they set us up with definition that has some rules to it, but yet it allows us to be creative. And I think I want to be a creative person. You can tell I am. I'm passionate about what I do, and I think that really that definition matches us. I think as Canadians, to be honest with you.
Well, I think Liz has some technical questions.
Sure, love it.
Here we go.
I know these things.
I noticed 15 minutes left, so I figured better get them in. So a couple questions, and also I think we haven't really talked about the wheel yet.
Oh yeah, the wheel.
So I think that's important to dig into while we have the time before we kind of answer some of the questions that
it says
people
link
submitted.
to the wheel below. Do we have
I think
link to the wheel below? If it's
there's
not,
a link.
it's also on the Facebook.
Lou, that's spelled Canadian, by the way. It's spelled Canadian.
I saw that.
So my questions were around.
You guys have so much money, all these extra letters you can afford.
After Liz is done, I want to ask, how do you feel about that South Park movie where they?
Oh my
call
gosh,
Blame
I'm
Canada?
never gonna get these questions. Okay.
All right, go ahead.
In general, so with the process of creating the wheel, what were some of the things that you did? Was it more analytical? Was it more sensory driven? And what was the real purpose behind creating this wheel? There it is. I think the wheel is displayed.
Glory.
Because it's a little bit of a different approach, and I think a lot of the wheels out there in whiskey. So if you wanted to just kind of walk through what was that process and what were the drivers?
Yeah,
can you blow that up with Will? Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got approached by the LCBO, which is the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, which is our largest customer and probably the largest purchaser of alcohol and spirits in the world. And they said, Dr. Don, where's the Canadian whiskey wheel? And I go, really? Do people really use those things? I honestly, that's how I respond. I kind of laughed and jest because I really look at them. They're not a lot of value for me as a blender. It's descriptor flowery terms in my mind. So I put pen to paper and they challenged me with it. And I came up with this in 24 hours. And by marketing,
sorry, what?
9 months to make it.
Be 24 hours straight?
Good God.
No, and it took me a day to think about it, and maybe the next morning. But it's 20 years of experience. Let's be fair. I mean, and this is the approach here. Is flavor only comes from 3 places, and it starts at the middle of the wheel. The yeast, the grain, or wood are the 3 places you can pull flavor in from. The second ring of the wheel are the things that I can manipulate. So fermentation with yeast, I can change the pH, the temperature, oxygen levels, nutrient levels to influence yeast making those types of flavors. I can change the grain around, like I talked about earlier, from wheat to barley to corn. Grain can spoil. I do have it on there. That can happen. Yeah. Hopefully not with our products. And we can burn a cask a certain way, or we can finish whiskeys, as people know about finishing and aging. The third ring of the wheel is what your traditional flavor wheels will have. Those are your flavor descriptors: spicy, caramel, toffee, pear, banana. The cool part about the wheel, and this is what I think about at nighttime, those are the molecular compounds that cause those and drives those flavors. So if you get a banana note in my whiskey, it's isoamyl acetate, and you can connect it right to yeast. Yeast made it. Or if you get a spicy note to your whiskey, it's 4-ethyl glycol, and it comes in from rye. Likewise, for my cask, that's where your vanilla. A lot of people will use the bubble gum sometimes, and it's not a wrong term to use in whiskey. It's maltol, and it comes from a cask, cotton candy note. So what this does is it's your distillery cheat sheet. Right. This tells you where this is where your flavor comes from. This is what I think about at nighttime. And then I think the part about this wheel too is what I showed the group yesterday is that I had things what we call polar histograms. So I can make a bar graph around the center of that wheel, a picture for each of the whiskeys that we have. So I can tell you what the flavor of your whiskey will be like and what's driving the majority of the flavor in your whiskey. And that's the next evolution of this. People aren't quite there yet. They're just getting used to this wheel. This has now been taken upon. It's now trademarked in 170 countries.
Nice.
Wow.
So
it's,
I guess the question is, if this is meant from a consumer tool, and maybe Lou jump in on this too, but do consumers care? Like, I'm just
care?
I think it's a niche thing again. Some of them do, and some of them don't.
Wow, Liz.
I don't know. I was just asking. I obviously care about it, but do people just want to say with your visual, your visual graphs?
I think I'm sorry.
I would have said the same thing before this. So that's why I said, did anybody use it? Remember when I said to the LCBO, when they asked me, I said, really, does anybody use those things? Yeah, because I
just want to know it's good. Or
I know that's huge. But I'll say this. We are now in a society that people care where their food comes from.
Yes.
So I think yes is the answer to that, probably now more than ever.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Because we can.
Yeah. Well, especially too. I mean, especially with certain stuff. I mean, whiskey. Obviously, over the last 10 years, it's been crazy. At least here in the US, with everybody wanting to know not only where it comes from, but the smallest details. And then with these nosing wheels, the flavor wheels, Dave Broom had helped Diageo make those flavor maps.
Yeah, the PCA plot or Scotch. Yeah,
they were all over them, and I think it does help because it does help people. If you've ever done staff trainings, or when you do consumer seminars and you're talking about flavor, and you see a lot of lost looks on people's faces when you start delving into it, they go, "Well, I smell wood." Yeah, go now, delve into more. What kind of wood? I mean, blah blah blah, and then this helps them out greatly.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and then if I had the polar histograms, which we don't have any here today, but and if you're picking up the whiskey, yeah, and you'll see these bar graphs. Oh, that's what that taste is. They can start recognizing. Oh, that's what a good quality cask tastes like. Oh, that's what happens when a whiskey has a lot of rye in it, or more corn, or barley and wheat, and it just helps explain and maps it together. So people are starting to care, Liz. I think it's a little bit ahead of its time. I think we're kind of catching up, but I mean, this is part of our platform as a company, is to start educating the consumer, because I think people want it. What you guys are doing today,
Yeah, about discovery too. Just thinking about the visuals in terms of, I'm a consumer. Maybe I don't need to know what exactly I'm tasting or where it comes from, but I'd like to understand the profiles that I find fascinating, that I find relatable or I enjoy, to then say, okay, well, let's find another one
that has the same profile. Yeah. And that's great insight, and that's the purpose of this, and this is why I designed it like this. And like I said, I think it almost should be a platform for every type of spirit, to be honest with you. We had the conversation yesterday. Lou, I know you're a beer guy. If I was to make a wheel like this from beer, yeast, hops, grain, right in the middle, you work your way out, right?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I can see it going in those same rings.
Yeah.
That's exactly. And I know Will, who's on too. He's a rum guy. You can easily do yeast, molasses, wood.
And do you think? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, yeah.
I was just gonna mention, because I mentioned this every show.
Just because you're talking to a Canadian doesn't mean you have to apologize.
Sorry.
Don't fall into that trap.
Let them do all the apologizing.
Just because I mentioned this every show.
She's going to say A before the end of this. Also.
A. No, it is true. I do pick up the A when I'm in Canada quite a bit, but the larger role of microbiota. So you have yeast there, but if we just go down, I mean, rum, also whiskey, also beer to some extent. Do you think that's just too technical for consumer to wrap their head around?
Honestly, I had a
microflora. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like lactic acid bacteria, for example.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you said. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's the sour part of yeast there. I could have had bacteria in there.
Yeah.
Maybe version 2.0, I could do that. In the spoilage of grain, I could do something there. And I mean, I dialed it back a little bit, and I've had people challenge me on that. The other one was water. Water give a flavor. That's debatable. I know I see the look on your face, Lou. Yeah, maybe. And I said to the group yesterday, if water's giving you a flavor, then you got a whole other set of problems.
That's a bit, yeah.
But potentially, and then
it's a worse problem than the spoiled grain.
Exactly.
Tastes like asparagus.
And then people said, what about filtering? Because we know filter pulls out ethyl palmitates and those things. But I mean, how technical do you want to get here? Liz, I know you want the next version. My next version, I could put those things in there. What I'd like to see on a fifth ring of the wheel, this is craziness. But I want to put the boiling point of each of those compounds.
See, I think you.
And that's a big thing too, because how do you decide?
The wagon wheel.
The decision to choose those congeners as well.
There's more. I know there's more.
Yeah.
I realize there's more.
And there's overlap too, right? If you think about a wheel versus a tree. Because there are a lot of synergies. I mean, ethyl acetate, for example.
Yep, and I got ethyl acetate on twice, right?
I saw that.
Yeah, and then I've got guaiacol on twice, because it either can come from grain or it can come from a cask. And I'll see writers write tasting notes on our brands. Oh, it's got a rye in it, and some of them don't even have rye in it at all, but they're tasting the same compound that's coming from the cask.
Yeah.
So that's a clever way blenders can make a perception from a whole different angle. Right?
See, I think these flavor. Well, first off, a flavor wheel also, as Liz, you mentioned before, if people use this, they dissect a whiskey, and then maybe they can move on to another whiskey that they find is similar because it has similar attributes. Well, that's also when you think about the regions of Scotland. That's what they did over in Scotland. There was the space side, and for a long time, the theory was, if you like one space side whiskey, you'll like another. to a varying degree. The same thing, Isla whiskies, blah, blah, blah. But these flavor wheels also came in very handy for especially the new crop, the last 15 years of bartenders who were dissecting spirits so they can make cocktails. If you have a banana taste, oh my God, I want to make a banana cocktail. Yeah. And I personally would like to find a banana in my whiskey. That would be just so weird. I'd love
It's
that.
the same compound that comes from yeast. But I'd like to actually see one of those whiskey wheels engraved on this glass. But I don't know how that can happen.
Yeah.
So let it be written. So let it be done. Don Livermore. Bunch of
what
whiskey
about
wheels.
Yeah? What about an engraved
Glass.
QR code?
Nerd.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Marty on this one. I'm sorry.
Or how about a lactone? I don't know.
There you go.
God.
Yeah.
Jeez, you guys must be
Speaking my language.
all at parties. Hey, does anyone want to see my lactone? I've got some lactones in the other room. I'll bring them out.
You could have a whole chemical structure lineup. You could collect the glasses.
Ooh.
I can't wait to have a big holiday party and just
3D. Yeah.
Hey, everybody, want me to see me split an atom? I can do it.
So I'm going to go on the whiskey wheel. I don't know how many compounds. So you could have a line extension of about 40 different glasses here, Marty.
Yeah. Co-branding.
You know there are collectors out there. You know that.
Actually, that could be a fun thing for you, Don. We could create a whole bunch of glasses with the different flavors.
There you go.
You could do a tasting. Of course, that would be hundreds of thousands of glasses if you did a seminar.
See what happens when you do these live, Liz? I don't know.
Yeah. There's been a lot of idea inception in this in this forum.
Hey, I could get some Post-it notes out and put it on the backboard here. The ideation session.
Good, the bad, the brainy. We have ideas, people.
I think Monique needs some smelling salts. She's supposedly getting very excited about all of this.
Yeah, she's getting real excited.
Hey, Lizard, did you not have another question? I think Steve actually had one. And I'm sorry, it's Bayshore, not Bosher. It's Bayshore. I mispronounced Stephen's name.
I did have more questions, but you're right. We have a fair amount of questions.
We do have some questions.
Yes, we do.
People in the audience, specifically the first one from Steve Bayshore. So back to some of the history. What do you think the influence of French settlement in Canada in the colonial period specifically, and the brandies that would have been brought in from France had on the development and flavor profiles sought in Canadian whiskies?
What a Bayshore kind of question.
Yeah.
You're Bayshore-esque.
Yeah.
The province of Quebec is actually today, and I know I'll go back to answer Steve's quick question, but today are really excited. They got one of the best whiskey clubs I've ever done a tasting in front of the Quebec whiskey. I'll give them props. So they really know their whiskeys and love it. So whiskey's starting to take off. They are a wine drinking province as well. So I think a lot of the cognacs and blend, they would have used those barrels. A lot of the older recipes I could see in our whiskey book were aged in cognac barrels. So there's evidence of that. The other probably thing, Steve, I think the province of Quebec would have been influenced by rum more than anything else. We still see a big rum influence in the eastern part of Canada today because that's what was available. Yeah, that was available, right? Because the cane was brought up in the British Navy, and you see Lamb's rum today. That's half of Newfoundland's liquor store out there is Lamb's rum, actually. So I think rum was more of an influence than the cognac, just because that was what was available during the colonial periods. Great question, Steve.
Michael Veitch.
I know the name.
Bourbon authority extraordinaire. He gives credit to both the English, but primarily the German settlers for bringing rye over, and really because they had already been making spirits with rye. But up in Canada and the northern states, there are a lot of Germans settled up there, and that
today we've moved Lot 40 over to a very unique hybrid of rye. It's called Brasetto rye, and a lot of the engineering work and hybrid work is still done in Germany today. So it is
KWS
developed. That's the company. Yeah. So
All right,
Another
Lizard.
question, Liz?
Yeah, so we have two more questions, so we'll trudge forward. Okay, so question from Monique.
We're trudging. This is feeling like trudging right now, Liz.
How do you feel about all this Canadian whiskey going to Japan?
Great. Great. Not my brand. Our brands aren't going to Japan, but I think it's great. I think they got great for the quality of it. They're very demanding, certainly in the Japanese market. I think they like the premiumization of Canadian whiskey. I think there's a lot of bulk whiskey that's sold to the Japanese market as well. So that's a big part of a lot of the Canadian whiskey distillers as well. And I just think it's because of their demand on the quality. I think it speaks to why all the Canadian whiskey is going there. I think just shows that yes, Canadian whiskey is good quality whiskey. I love it.
It's amazing.
Gavin was talking about some really high-end stuff that was selling in Taiwan.
Yeah. There's one of our competitors. They had a 20-year. I think it was a 20-year that was selling there. Yeah. I mean, we only have so much 20-year to go around, so I haven't entered those markets yet. And then probably the first place would be the U.S.
Southeast Asia is a
hold that thought.
Yeah. Southeast Asia is a huge market for, especially that really high-end whiskey.
Yeah.
And I know that's a number of high-end scotches. I mean, real high-end scotches. George Grant, Glenfarclas, that's probably his biggest market, actually, for all his older stuff. And they drink it in shots.
Oh, yeah.
You mean bang?
Boom.
Shots.
I love it. So it's kind of it's very much status. It's very status over there.
Monique also mentioned best wheel.
So, thumbs up, Monique.
Big fan, Monique. She might be outside your house later, so be careful.
She's in Detroit.
Right. Yeah.
She will be in a few hours. What about Brett?
That's really accurate.
Brett has a question.
Okay, so our last question from Brett. Do you think that the Canadian method of production and emphasis on blending has a place in the larger distilling world? And if so, what spirit category do you see this making the biggest impact?
I honest blending, you're picking the best flavors. I really, really ultimately believe that. And if Brett's within the Detroit area, and once we get out of the whole COVID situation, if you go to jpweiserstour.ca, I offer blending classes for $100. That's only like $40 US, so don't worry about it. But $100 Canadian, you come in and I put out 140 different things I make, and you can come in and blend your own whiskey.
See, I love that. I love how U.S. money goes so far in the third world.
I'm joking. The northern world. I think, Lou, you've had an opportunity to come do some blending with me, right? It's such a fabulous experience.
Great time. I learned a hell of a lot. Just finding out what some of the blends that you already have are, where the components are, and the stuff you play around with.
I got corn, rye, wheat, base whiskey. I got port, Madeira, PX, peated quarter casks. I got maple. I got hickory, Japanese Mizunara casks. I throw it all out on the table. Go ahead and make your own blend, and you never make the same one twice. And it's such a unique experience to figure out what is the best whiskey out there. And I take it as a learning experience. It's my chance to talk to higher end consumers. What are you looking for? And I think that's why some of the launches you see in behind me have been so successful. I've taken it from my blending 101. For $100, you get to blend your own whiskey, and you pull in your different flavors. I think people walk away saying that it's an awesome experience. I see him. Thanks for bringing rum. Yeah, I could do the same thing for rum. I do have responsible for a brand called Lamb's Rum here in our facility. Yeah, and rum is fantastic. I think it's an emerging category. I want to make more rum, to be honest with you. It's there's some neat flavors you can bring to the table for that.
I guess just drawing some analogies to other spirit categories. Back to your control, conversation. If you think about, bitters or the gen category where people are actually making extractions or distillations on single botanicals, and then
same thing.
So just
That's
thinking about other
for
categories.
Canadian whiskey.
Yeah.
Same. We don't have to in Canada, but the larger you get, you tend to operate that way, and it's due to innovation, right? Because I don't know what mash bill people will want 10 years from now. If I was a bourbon producer, I'd go crazy because you're stuck with it, right? What do you do with it, right? Whereas Canada, you can, I'm going to do a little bit of wheat today, so maybe more rye. You kind of forecast a little bit, and you can play around, and it's a good place to be to try stuff. It's like I said, it's innovative, creative, and it's an adaptable style of whiskey. We can adapt the flavor profile that people are wanting to. And I look at Polaroid as a company. Did they adapt? I mean, you know what I mean? It's one of those things. You got to adapt to what your consumers are looking for today, right?
Yeah. You don't want to be a dead shark. You got to keep them moving.
And the way the category is, that's why most producers in Canada will operate that way.
Don, with the release of the dark oak, I like that. It sounds like a new
mysterious,
druidic,
a new Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So with this though, being a rye, now that's 100% rye.
It is, yeah. So we'll use enzymes. We have for 50, 60 years in Canada.
But now, do you get any kickback because of the confusion?
You mean pushback?
Oh, yeah. What did I say? Kickback? Yeah, no.
It's a Chicago thing. Yeah,
pushback. Yeah, and people kicking them. There are people kicking them. As far as you go up there, and the term rye whiskey is thrown around so much that it's confusing. You go, oh, you mean this is really all rye? Because you're going to have some with very little rye in it.
Yeah, that's why we declared it on the label 100% rye. But it drives me. Now, if I had a chance to do the distillation side and had a big full PowerPoint, I know Lou's sat in it a few times. You got to be careful because we're brewers as well as distillers, right? If I put it once through a column still, you keep the grain, your fruity, floral, green grass, soapy notes the yeast has made. You pull out the sulfur because it binds to the copper. If I distill it twice through 2 column stills, I can make it from corn, wheat, rye, or barley, and you won't be able to tell the difference. So when you ask a Canadian producer, you said, okay, are you 100% rye? Your next question right away should be, well, how did you distill it?
Yeah.
There's a couple of products on the marketplace that says on their label 100% rye. You taste it. I don't taste any 4-ethyl. Here's my whiskey. Well, I don't taste any 4-ethyl guaiacol in my whiskey. It's not spicy at all.
And what yeast strain did you use?
We double distilled it and made the base whiskey from it. So you got to be careful when you ask Canadians about the percentages of grain. What grain did you use, and how did you distill it?
I just thought a new use for that flavor wheel would make a really nice T-shirt.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I should have worn my lignin T-shirt today. Lignin's the world's most unappreciated molecule.
Lignin.
Again, nerd.
Well, no, the rye thing gets Davin pissed off because he's and rightly so. He's upset that people, Americans, hold Canadian whiskey to American.
Yeah, but that's what they know.
Regulation.
I mean, that's not. I mean, we're trying to make an American single malt category, and we're trying to work with the Scots and the Irish as far as making it separate but similar. I mean, so when you go up there, it's a brand new world, and it doesn't. You're trying to make sense of it in your American brain. You go, but back there, I was told something else.
What's Davin say? There's like 44 different definitions of whiskey in the United States. I think it's 44. I think he's told. I'd have to go look, but
we're the wild west of whiskey.
One in Canada. They leave the interpretation to the blender, right? They leave the interpretation. I mean, maybe that's the detriment, though. In fairness, maybe that because people don't understand.
Yeah.
But that's where I think.
That's what I was asking earlier about. Was it culture? Is it business? You guys haven't explained what you are. You're doing it. Yeah. And before you, nobody did.
And to Liz, the technical side of it, I think that if I could get into those polar histograms and I think that will help explain, right? Why this really tastes the way it does. So again, it's an evolution.
Make that polar histogram into a video game because the way you were describing it, I remember playing an arcade game that looked like that, and I think that would work for people.
It looks like the radiation symbol, right? It looks like the radiation symbol, right? But I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you could argue, we could have a great debate. Is it better to have loose definitions, or is it better to have concrete and decide? But my challenge is, I know this audience is here because they're technical people, and they probably could pick up and read a label and understand which category. But I'll tell you, people walk in the store and they'll see a flavored whiskey and they think it is whiskey, right? I mean, it is so great in the liquor stores today that you don't even know what is whiskey and what isn't, right? It is tough.
And that's so that's the thing. And there's two different types of consumers. One are the consumers who are looking for a product that is defined. You know what it is. That's what it is. I like single malt Scotch. That's what I'm going to buy. I like blended Canadian. That's what I'm going to buy. Then you got things like, Fireball is called a whiskey.
Distilled spirit specialty, right? That's what it is, right?
But it's also introduced to usually primarily young people in college towns. Yeah. And then that's what they've learned. That's to them, that's whiskey. So that's it. When I was bartending back 30 years ago, Southern Comfort was always called a whiskey. And
I was thinking Recon Jack. Same thing.
And it's sold those are sold in whiskey aisles in most retails because I asked the guys, how come these are here? They're not whiskeys. And they go, because everybody assumes they are. So
I saw somebody pop up a question reach out to me on social media. You can see my CDN whiskey doc and I'll get you what you're looking for.
All right. So, what is this last one? What's Bill Lumpton's?
Yeah, that's what he just did.
Question. Yeah, the histogram.
That's what you just
reach out to Don.
Reach out to Don.
Yeah.
And Brad says, come to Panama. I make rum as well. So that sounds lovely. Let's all go to Panama.
Careful. Last person to visit Brad in Panama never came back. That could be a good thing. Could be a bad thing. Just saying.
What a great discussion. And Lou, if you look at the beer category today, what's an ale seems like a lager, and what's a lager is an ale. I mean, it's like the graying of categories is like it's everywhere now. It's everywhere.
It's just a smear.
Yeah,
so to speak.
The Dave schmear.
Yes.
The Dave schmearing.
On that note, Don, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We've already had ours.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to just reach out to me or see what a life of a master blender, certainly I would say go to watch me at CDN Whiskey Doc on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, and we'll have announcements of products. And once we get our Blending 101 up again, I'll certainly announce those. And certainly all of you are invited to come and visit me when the border opens up again.
Yeah, well, I'll sneak over there anyways. I'm good that way. Actually, real quick, I wanted to ask you about this. Wait, Liz, real quick, because this was something I had heard rumors of, that Hiram Walker built a tunnel underneath the river that led to Detroit. True?
There is a tunnel to Detroit, but Hiram Walker didn't build it. And it's the one people take every day for commuting. So no, there's no pipeline. There is no tunnel. That's why the rum runners, they had boats, lots of boats. I don't know how many miles of waterway between Canada and the U.S., but I'm sure they could avoid the police for sure. No tunnel. No tunnel.
All right, go ahead, Lizard.
I was just going to say, should we introduce our guest for next week?
Yeah.
Please do.
It is all the way from Ireland.
Yes.
Louise McGuane, are you out there, Louise? I saw that she was liking this event earlier today, so hopefully she's on, so she get a little taste of what she's in for. But Louise from Chapelgate and JJ Corey Irish Whiskey. So again, expanding internationally. We really do have to go beyond Scotland, Ireland, and Canada. In the U.S.
In the U.S.
Really going to be international, yeah. But yeah, so Luis will be on. Everybody, Don, enjoy your personalized glasses, a little Christmas present.
I will. Thank you very much for those.
Everybody, don't forget, Lou Bryson's latest book, and
That's a great Christmas gift.
251, a whole paragraph about Marty Duffy and how he helped a young kid named Lou Bryson reach the top of the industry.
With a dire dream.
Just a kid with a song in his heart and a dream in his head. So thank you again, Don. You've been great. This is really good stuff. Lizard, Lou, happy Thanksgiving.
Guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, all your
Cheers,
kids out
everyone.
there. Bye-bye.
Bye.